What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Nash here. Welcome back to the channel, and today I've got a very strange deck for you guys. And by strange, I mean I have a Gimmick Puppet deck. Yeah, I did not think I would ever have to build this deck, but I figured, what the hell, why not? Ooh, excuse me. Shoutouts to Starbucks, that was the reason. Shoutouts to Starbucks, not sponsored, just coffee's awesome. But, yeah, Gimmick Puppet is actually a very weird archetype to build because it's more suited when it's a pure build because if you were to add added packages to the deck, it just doesn't mix. It really just does not mix, which is kind of crazy. But before we get started with this deck profile, I want to address something from last night on SmackDown. I know that this isn't Yu-Gi-Oh related, but if you guys saw SmackDown last night, I fucking called it. If you guys remember my Payback 2020 prediction video, I believe if I remember correctly, I said Paul Heyman was setting Roman Reigns up for Brock Lesnar. And I fucking called it. I called it. I was right the entire time. Yet nobody wanted to believe me. They all thought nobody believed me. Not even the Twitter trollers. The Twitter trolls were like, "Oh, they're okay." Nope. I was right the entire time. So now the question remains: what does Paul Heyman do? Yeah, the answer is simple. He goes back to Brock Lesnar. It's just that simple. He goes back to Brock Lesnar, plain and simple. That being said, this deck, that was all I wanted to talk about with WWE. But what's cool about this deck is that it uses up not all, but just some of the new cards from Immortal I believe from Immortal Destiny, if I remember correctly. But it also has not one, not two, not three, but 4 rank up spells. And the extra deck is just absolutely insane. So I'm not going to waste any time. I'm just going to go straight into the deck profile. And hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you do, make sure you guys smash the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. The links will be in the description below. And for fan mail, if you guys want to send fan mail, my address will also be in the description as well. Anyway, let's get straight into it. First up, we have 2 copies of Gimmick Puppet Shadow Feeler. This card is actually really cool because its effect reads, cannot be destroyed by battle. When you take battle damage from an opponent's direct attack while this card is in your grave, you can special summon this card from your grave. I swear I am living in a zoo with a bunch of... I swear, those 3 dogs will never shut up. Anyway, as I was saying before I got really interrupted, the effect reads, cannot be destroyed by battle. When you take battle damage from an opponent's direct attack while this card is in your grave, you can special summon this card from your grave and face up attack position. And if you do, take 1,000 damage. You can only use this effect once per turn. If this card is an exceeds material and will be sent to the grave, banish it instead. So it is unfortunate that you have to banish it, but what's cool about this is that it has sort of like a Monster Reborn effect, and there's a way that you can actually send it to the graveyard. I think you can actually send it to the graveyard off of, I believe, what is it, Gigantus Doll? I think something like that. But there's a way you can Foolish Burial this card straight to the graveyard, and also it's a level 8, and most of the main deck is just all level 8s. You have what? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 level 8s, and then the rest of the monsters are just level 4. So you have 1, 2, 3, 6, 9 level 4s, which is pretty cool. Which is pretty cool. So you're pretty much guaranteed to have game on board first turn, depending on whether you're going first or second. Depending on the board state, you could potentially have game on board depending on your opening hand. Next up, we have 3 copies of Gimmick Puppet Magnet Doll. This card's just absolutely... I swear, all these cards are just freaky as fuck. But what's cool about this is that it has the Cyber Dragon effect, where it says if your opponent controls... Excuse me. If your opponent controls a monster and all monsters you control are face out Gimmick Puppets, minimum 1, you can special summon this card from your hand. So it's basically... So again, it's basically a Cyber Dragon where you can just summon this card from your hand if you have another Gimmick Puppet on board, and if it's a level 8, it works. It works perfect because you just rank them up. You can just go ahead and summon out one of your rank 8s, which there are only 5 rank 8s, and then the rest are, and then you have 5 rank 9s. 3 rank 4s, and 3 links in the extra deck, which is absolutely insane. Next up, we have 3 copies of Gimmick Puppet Bisque Doll. This is actually another one of the new cards that I had talked about on the channel last year when Immortal Destiny was released. But if you guys had never seen that part of the video, it's an 8-star Dark Machine with 1,000 attack and defense. And it says, you can special summon this card from your hand by discarding 1 Gimmick Puppet monster. You can banish the card from your grave. Your opponent cannot target Gimmick Puppet monsters you control with card effects this turn. So not only is this a Cyber Dragon, but it also has sort of like a mix of Imperial Order, Royal Decree type of deal where you can't target where your opponent can't target any of your gimmick puppets with card effects. So it's essentially your big out to cards like Imperm and Nibiru. Nibiru can actually be stopped by this card, which is absolutely hilarious. And also too, it's a level 8, so it works perfect with your rank 8 plays. Next up, we have 2 copies of Twilight Joker. This is probably one of the best cards in the deck because its effect reads, when a Gimmick Puppet monster you control is destroyed by battle into your grave, you can banish that monster, special summon this card from your hand. You can only use this effect once per turn. It is unfortunate that you do have to banish it, but what's cool about this is that you can actually summon this during your battle phase, and then go into your main phase 2, special summon the Magnet Doll, go into a card like say number 15, activate a card like say Numeron Force, and because that both Magnet Doll and Twilight Joker would potentially be the only 2 you have on board, you activate Numeron Force, you go into Giant Hunter, and your opponent has it's essentially a way to just negate all of your opponent's cards. And you could just you could just use Giant Hunter's effect for game, basically, which is pretty crazy. Next up, we actually have a sort of like a support card for the deck, Gear Spring Spirit. I believe this was from World Superstars, if I remember correctly. But it's an 8-star Dark Machine with 100 attack and defense. So this is perfect for this would be a perfect machine dupe target if you had multiple copies. But there's only one copy in the deck. And the effect reads, cannot be normal summon or set, must first be special summoned from your hand by having only machine monsters in your graveyard, minimum 1. Once per turn, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls. Its attack becomes 0 until the end phase. So this would be perfect if you were going into your rank 8 place rank 8 plays, and you can just attack directly into your opponent's monsters for full damage. So if you had a card like, say, I'll say Gimmick Puppet of Dark Strains, which has 3,300 attack, basically your opponent is being dealt 3,300 damage right off the bat, which is pretty crazy. And again, level 8, perfect target. And then to round out the level 8s, we have 3 copies of Gimmick Puppet Dreary Doll. This is another one of the good cards that's in the deck, and that's in the archetype alone, because its effect reads: if this card is in your grave, you can banish one other Gimmick Puppet monster from your grave. Special summon this card. You can only use this effect of Dreary Doll once per turn. Cannot be used as material. Cannot be used as material for an Xyz summon, except for Xyz summon of a Gimmick Puppet monster. It is unfortunate that that it had to be that way. But what's cool about this is that excuse me, is that all you gotta do is just banish this card, is just banish a Gimmick Puppet from your grave and summon it. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. Moving on into the level 4s of the deck, we have 1 copy of Gimmick Puppet Destroy. And the reason why I only chose 1 is because it's not that good, but it's kind of decent. Once face up on the field, you can target a Gimmick Puppet monster in the field, destroy it. You're destroying your own monsters, which is kind of unfortunate, but its second effect is actually kind of unique. When this card is sent from the field to the grave, you can special summon 1 or 2 Gimmick Puppet monsters from your hand. So it acts as sort of like a double Sidra, which is not too bad. Go into your level 8s, boom, you have a rank 8 play. Plain and simple. Next up, we have 2 copies of Gimmick Puppet Scissor Arms. This card is actually kind of cool. This is actually the card that I talked about where you can send Shadow Feeler to the graveyard, because this card has a Foolish Burial effect, where it says when this card is normal summon, you can send a Gimmick Puppet monster from your deck to the graveyard. So this is basically your Foolish Burial for the deck, which is pretty cool. And then next up we have 3 copies of Gimmick Puppet Terror Baby. This card is just so freaky. The baby looks like something that Dark Necrophile would hold, which is kind of hilarious. But this is yet another one of the new cards that's in the set that was in Immortal Destiny, and the effect reads: when this card is normal summon, you can target a Gimmick Puppet monster in your grave, except this card, special summon it in defense. You can banish the card from your grave. Your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to the activation of your Gimmick Puppet monsters this turn. Basically, if you have Giant Hunter on board, you can banish Terror Baby. Your opponent can't imperm this, can't imperm Giant Hunter, unless if the chain goes unless if your opponent activated Call by the Grave onto on Terror or rather, I guess Solemn Warning on what'd you call it? On Terror Baby, in which case it would be just waste. In which case it would be wasted. But you want to try and maximize having Terror Baby in your graveyard as much as possible by using it as link material to go into your Chimera Doll, or even also or even also any other link monster you could think of. That way you have exactly what, three disruptions in your graveyard, plus the 3 Bisque dolls that are in your graveyard as well. That's what, six disruptions in your graveyard, which is insane. And then last but not least, we have Gimmick Puppet Humpty Dumpty. Yeah, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. Anyway, I'm sorry, guys. That was the worst. That was the worst dad joke ever. I'm sure Cesaro would be like fuming right now if he heard that one. That was bad. But even you guys have to. It was kind of funny. Anyway, Humpty Dumpty's effect reads: when this card is normal special summon, you can special summon a Gimmick Puppet monster from your hand, and you can only use this effect once per turn. So this acts as sort of like. This acts as basically your marauding captain of the deck, where when you normal summon this card, you can summon another monster of the same type, or the same type, or whatever from your hand. In which case, with this, you summon Humpty Dumpty, go into your scissor arms, overlay them into your Gigantus doll, or even your Gear Gigant X, which I'm actually running 2 copies of, which I'll explain later once we get into the extra deck, and you're pretty much just off to the races there. Moving on into the spells, we actually have exactly 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 spells, and then 3, 6, 7 traps. So first up, we have 3 copies of Trade-In. This is basically your pot of greed for the deck. You can actually also, if you have Trade-In and Shadow Feeler in your hand, you activate Trade-In, send the Shadow Feeler to the grave, draw 2, and then you can actually revive it off of something like Monster Reborn or whatever, and you can go into your rank 8 plays from there, which is pretty cool. Next up, we have Condolence Puppet. I believe this is another one of the new cards that was in Immortal Destiny, but its effect reads send Gimmick Puppet monsters with different names from your deck to the grave up to the number of monsters your opponent controls that were special summoned from the extra deck, +1. You can manage the card from your grave, then target a machine exceeds monster you control. It cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects while face up on the field. You can only use each effect once per turn. The only reason why I decided to only put this at 1 is because you really don't want to send your Gimmick Puppets to your graveyard. You want to try and maximize having them in the hand or potentially in the deck. That way you can summon them and go into your rank 8 plays, which is just absolutely nutty. It is as nutty as it can get. But also too, what's cool about this is that it has what's called the return of the Dragon Lord's effect, where you can banish it from your graveyard, and essentially your monsters are protected, which is pretty cool. Next up, we have 3 copies of Machine Dupe. Because that Druid doll, that Druid doll is actually, because that your Druid doll, Humpty Dumpty, and Terror Baby are all less than 500, have at least 500 or less attack, you can actually summon multiple copies of them to your field, which is pretty cool. But I think what I'm gonna do, and I know I know that this might be a little crazy, but because I don't want Machine Dupe to be a brick, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a copy of Call by the Grave. And the reason why I want to put in a copy of Call by is because of 2 things. Number one is the fact that I actually have hand traps in the side deck, and I chose to put them in the side because you never know you never know whether you need to side them in or keep them out. But also too, if your Terror Baby and your Beast dolls get negated, you want to try and have something to counter your opponent's hand traps, like potentially a Nibiru, potentially a Ash Blossom, maybe even a Ghost Ogre for that matter. And Call by the Grave is the only card that can do that. So I'm gonna put put machine duplication to 2, and add in the Call by the Grave. But moving on, we do have 2 copies of Junks Puppet. This is basically your Monster Reborn for the Gimmick Puppet. So it says target 1 Gimmick Puppet monster in your grave, special summon it. It's basically a Monster Reborn, which brings us to that. We actually have a copy of Monster Reborn. The one copy of Call by I had talked about it just a second ago. And then for the rank up spells, we have Argent Chaos Force, Numeron Force, and Quick Chaos. Argent Chaos Force is one of the most broken cards in the meta. I don't even know why. I don't know why they decided to bring this back up to like 3. I think they brought this up to 3 for some dumbass reason. But its effect reads: target a rank 5 or higher exceeds monster you control. Special summon from your extra a Chaos number or Chaos exceeds monster that has a rank higher than the monster you control by using the target as material. In which case, it's treated as an exceed summon, and the materials are transferred to the summon monster. When a rank 5 or higher monster is special summoned to your field while this card is in your grave, except during the damage step, you can add this card to your hand. You can only use this effect once per duel. So what's cool about this is that you can use the first effect again next turn, but the second effect you can only use it once. So you have to be extra careful when you use this card, because you never know what can happen. And then of course Numeron Force is basically Argent Chaos Force, but what's cool about this is that basically it acts as sort of like a Dark Ruler no more of sorts, which is really cool about this card. And then of course 2 copies of Quick Chaos. You never know what can happen. Truth be told, I'm actually running all 3 Gimmick Puppet numbers and their Chaos numbers, so you never know what can happen with Quick Chaos. And then to round out the spells, we have the 1 copy of Perform Puppet. This card, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. So the effect reads: you can banish 1 Gimmick Puppet monster from your grave. All monsters you currently control become that banished monster's level until the end of the turn, even if this card leaves the field. If a face-up Gimmick Puppet monster or monsters you control is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect and sent to the grave, you can target one of your banished Gimmick Puppets, special summon it. So not only does this act as a sort of like a Starlight Starbright, where I'm actually gonna Starlight Starbright. So let's see. Starlight Starbright reads target a face-up monster you control, all face-up monsters you currently control. Is it that? Was it that, or was something else? It must have been something else. Something else. I think it was some level card. I don't remember what it was, but basically it acts as sort of like a way to ensure that you go into your rank 8 or even into your rank 4, depending on how you see fit. And plus, not only that, this also acts as sort of like a different dimension reincarnation of sorts, where you can target one of your banished monsters and summon it right off the bat, which is pretty cool. And it's a continuous spell, so it's pretty cool. But moving on into the traps, there are only 7 in the deck. First up, we have the 1 copy of Infinite Impermanence. You'll understand why I have 1 in the main once we go into the side deck. But Infinite Impermanence, you can never go wrong with a copy of Imperm. Next up, we have 3 copies of Puppet Parade. Now I know that. Now I actually tested this deck out using Trap Trick, and I realized Trap Trick really does nothing. It really does nothing. Yes, it does give you another copy, but even though you have 3 copies, you're sending a copy to your graveyard. You don't want to do that. You really don't want to do that. So I would have preferred Booby Trap E. I probably would have done a card like say Booby Trap E or something like that. But still, this card is actually really good, and you don't even need Trap Trick for it. Because its effect reads, if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, special summon a Gimmick Puppet monster with different names from your deck, up to the difference. Then, if your opponent's life points are at least 2,000 or higher than yours, you can set a rank up normal spell directly from your deck. For the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters except Gimmick Puppets. You can activate one puppet parade per turn. So again, this acts as sort of like a your monster spam, if you will, for the deck, and you can actually set Numeron Force from your deck, and if you only have 2 Gimmick Puppet, level 8s, you overlay them, summon a card like say Giant Grinder, activate Numeron Force, go into Giant Hunter, and you instantly have a Dark Rule No More right off the bat, which is just absolutely insane. Then we have the one copy of Zing Zang Hu. You guys know I love this card. This card is just absolutely insane. This is basically your Floodgate. It's an old school Floodgate that was released in Rise of Destiny. But what's cool about this is that against a deck like this, your opponent is going to be setting a lot of back rows. So you want to try and make sure you have at least one of these in the deck, so you can activate it, target two of their sets, and it's done. It's basically just done. You essentially just win. And then of course we have 2 copies of Solemn Warning, because you need Solemn Warning. Moving on into the extra deck, I'm actually going to be going from Xyz to Links, because normally I would go from Links to Fusions and whatnot, but I'm going to go the opposite direction. But first up, we have 2 copies of number 15, Gimmick Puppet Giant Grinder. This card is actually pretty cool, because it says up to twice per turn during your main phase 1, you can detach a material from this card, then target a special summon monster your opponent controls, destroy it. Then if it was an Xyz monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to its original attack. So this acts as sort of like your Infernity Doom Dragon, where you can deal damage to your opponent, which is really cool. Next up, we have 2 copies of number 40, Gimmick Puppet of Strings. This card is kind of interesting, because the effect reads, once per turn, you can detach a material from this card, place a string counter on each face-up monster on the field, except this card. Once per turn during the next end phase of the opponent of the player who placed string counters who placed a string counter or counters by this effect, destroy the monsters with string counters, and if you do, inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each monster destroyed. So because that it would normally be your end phase, you get to pop all monsters who have string counters, and your opponent will be dealt 500. You want to try and make sure that this is the only card that you have, this is the only monster you have on the field, and your opponent has nothing but monsters. Once that happens, you can activate its effect, and basically just pop off and be able to just deal up to what? 3,000 damage? It's not too bad. It's not too bad. And then of course we have basically the fuck you of the whole deck. You're wondering, what card do I mean by that? Number 88, Gimmick Puppet of Leo. This card just basically says fuck you, because its effect reads, once per turn, if you have no cards in your spell and trap zone, you can detach 1 Xyz material from this card. And if you do, place a Destiny counter on this card. You cannot conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this effect. When 3 Destiny counters are on this card, you win the duel. Again, it says fuck you. Just plain simple. It just says fuck you. Not gonna say anything more. Although it does require three level 8s, it's still pretty good. It's still a pretty good card. But moving on into the Chaos numbers, we have Chaos number 15, Gimmick Puppet Giant Hunter. This card is really good because it's basically a Giant Grinder, but it's even better because its effect reads, once per turn, you can detach 1 Xyz material from this card, target a card your opponent controls, destroy it, and if it was and if you do, and it was a monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to its original attack. So what's cool about this is the fact that you can just basically just you're gonna be forcing your opponent to attempt to use up an imperm, so you can't use that effect. And again, it works so much better than Giant Grinder because it says special summon. With Giant Hunter, it just says target a card, so you can either target a monster or a back row, which is just absolutely insane. Then we have 2 copies of Chaos number 40 Gimmick Puppet of Dark Strings. This card, holy shit, is nuts. This card is just absolutely nuts. Because its effect reads, when this card is special summoned, destroy the monsters with string counters, and if you do, draw 1 card. Then inflict damage to your opponent equal to the highest original attack of among those destroyed monsters in the graveyard, your choice if tied. Once per turn, you can detach 1 excuse material from this card, place 1 string counter on each face-up monster your opponent controls. So what's cool about this is that you can actually, if you have a second copy of, if you have Dark Strings on the field and Strings on the field, you can actually trigger Strings effect and deal 500 damage. It's an endless loop. It's basically an endless loop where not only could you be drawing a card, but you could also be dealing 500 damage to your opponent for each string counter, for each monster destroyed that has a string counter on the field, which is just absolutely nuts. And then of course we have Chaos number 88 Gimmick Puppet Disaster Leo. Again, this card just says fuck you. This is one of the biggest epitomes of fuck you could think of. This card is one of the most difficult numbers to summon, because this is the only one of only very few Xyz monsters that require more than 3. This one requires 4 level 9s, which is nuts. Its effect reads, must be special summoned with a rank up magic spell card targeting number 88 Gimmick Puppet Leo and cannot be summoned by other ways. This card cannot be targeted by card effects. Once per turn, you can detach 1 Xyz material from this card and inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent. During each end phase, if your opponent's life points are 2,000 or less, and this card has no materials, you win the duel. Again, this just says fuck you, so fuck you. You want to try and maximize, literally dealing damage to your opponent. Maximize it. Maximize it, maximize it, maximize it. That way you can just easily win the duel that way. There are other ways you can actually win, but this is one of the best, one of the most insane ways to win. And it's a 3,500 beat stick, which is even more hilarious. Moving on into the rank 4s, there are only 3 rank 4s in the deck. We have 2 copies of Gear Gigant X. So this card is really cool because its effect reads, once per turn you can detach one material from this card, add a level 4 or lower machine monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand. When this face-up card leaves the field, you can target a level 3 or lower Gear Gigant monster in your grave, special summon that target. So obviously you're not running any Gear Gigas, but what's cool about this is that it basically has the Rhoda effect where you can search out one of your level 4 Gimmick Puppets from your deck, add it to your hand, and just pop off from there, which is pretty cool. And then to round out the Xyz monsters, we have 1 copy of Gimmick Puppet Gigantes Doll. This card is kind of unique. It's kind of unique because it does require 2 level 4 Gimmick Puppets, which you've got quite a few of them, of course. But its effect reads, you can detach 2 materials from this card, then target up to 2 monsters your opponent controls, gain control of them until the end phase. Also, for the rest of the turn, you cannot special summon monsters except Gimmick Puppet monsters, nor declare an attack except with the Xyz monsters. You contribute this card, all monsters you currently control become level 8 until the end of the turn. You can only use each effect once per turn. Yeah, this card basically just allows you to go even further with your rank 8 plays, which can help you go into Gimmick Puppet Leo, activate a card like, say, Argent Chaos Force, summon Disaster Leo, and you're essentially just off to the races there. And then to round out the extra deck, we have the one copy of Nightmare Unicorn. Obviously, you want to try and pop cards on your opponent's field, and your opponent may end up compulsing it, so it'll make things even more funnier to pop even more cards on the field. And then of course we have 2 copies of Gimmick Puppet Chimera Doll. I never thought Gimmick Puppets would ever get a Link monster, but it's still pretty cool. But its effect reads: during your main phase, if you control this Link summon card, you can activate this effect. You cannot special summon a monster from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except Machine Xyz monsters. Also take a Gimmick Puppet monster from your deck, either add it to your hand or send it to the graveyard. Then if all monsters you control are Gimmick Puppet monsters, minimum 1, you can special summon a Gimmick Puppet monster from your hand. So not only does this have a sort of like... So that first part is basically... You can either use it as a Rhoda or use it as a Foolish Burial, and then you can Sidra a monster from your hand, which is absolutely insane. It's just absolutely crazy. So that's pretty much it for the extra deck. The side deck is just absolutely nuts. So for the side deck, I'm running 2 copies of Ash Blossom and 2 copies of Ghost Ogre. You're wondering, Ghost Bell. Ghost Bell. 2 Ash Blossom, 2 Ghost Bell. You're wondering, where's the Ghost Ogre? Truth be told, I'm actually running 2 cards that can actually help this deck out immensely, and I'll explain that here in a second. But Ash Blossom focuses on... You guys know what Ash Blossom does. It focuses on either adding cards from the deck to the hand, summoning from the deck, or sending cards from the deck to the grave. Ghost Bell is basically the opposite of that, which is pretty cool. Then, of course, I am running 2 Synchros, both of which are just absolutely insane. I am running Beelzeus of the Diabolic Dragons. This card is absolutely nuts. This card is just insane. Its effect reads: cannot be destroyed either by battle or card effects. Let's see. Other monsters you control cannot attack. Once per turn, you can target a monster your opponent controls. Any battle gems your opponent takes from attacks involving this card this turn is half. Also change that monster's attack to 0, and if you do gain life points equal to its original attack. You're basically going to be gaining life points with this card, which is absolutely nuts. And then, of course, I am actually running a card that... You guys are probably thinking, why? Why exactly am I running this card? Psy-Frame Lord Omega. The reason why I'm running this card is because you're going to be banishing your cards from your graveyard, which may sound like you don't want to do, but it's something that you have to do. And Psy-Frame Lord Omega basically just ensures that they go back into your graveyard, so you can trigger their effects again. Especially if you have Terror Baby and also Bisdol in your graveyard. Once you use them, once you banish them, Psy-Frame Lord Omega just brings it back into your graveyard. So it's as if you're gonna have, so you're gonna be having, it's gonna be basically an infinite loop of disruptions, and you're essentially just gonna be popping off from there. Moving on into the spells of the side deck, we have the 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, 2 Forbidden Chalice, because obviously it's basically another imperm, and then 2 copies of Xyz Import. You're wondering, why am I running this card? It's because of the fact that with a card like, say, Gear Gigant X, you're gonna end up having you're gonna be overusing Gear Gigant X's effect. So you want to try and maximize having materials on your Xyz monsters so you can use their effects more so on Giant Hunter, so you can keep using the effect over and over again, which is absolutely insane. And then for the traps, we have the second copy of Imperm in case if a card like say Trade and becomes a break, or a Machine Dude becomes a break. 2 copies of Waking the Dragon, obviously for the Omega and the Beelzeus, and then the second copy of Zing Zang Hu, again, in case if you get bricks in the deck. But all in all, I think, honestly, this actually is just absolutely nutty. Absolutely insane. Being the fact that this is a pure build, I absolutely love it. I've always wanted to build Gimmick puppets, given the fact that this is a deck that was used by Quattro in the Zexal anime. He was one of my out of all 4 that bared the mark of the crest. Quattro was one of my favorites because he was such a hard ass. He was such a badass in the anime. He was helping out. He would help out. He had helped out Yuma and his friends to overcome the Baryons and whatnot. This deck was one of my favorite archetypes of the Zexal anime, as well as Galaxy Eyes and Sharks, of course. But all in all, awesome deck. I did some excessive test playing on this. Took me like weeks to get this right, and it's complete. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this deck profile. Let me know in the comments below your thoughts on it. I'm very curious about it. And that is going to do it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you guys smash the thumbs up button. If you guys are new to the channel, you guys want to see more deck profiles in the future, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you guys don't miss out on any new content that comes your way. And be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. All the links will be down in the description below. And if you guys have any fan mail you want to send me and want me to open up on the channel, my address will also be in the description as well. And on that, this is your boy Nash, signing out.